Well, we're just telling you the facts of what you should have been told decades ago. As a matter of fact, you should have been given this information in the third grade.
Sean Power said there was an old techie movie where the computer would steal pennies from bank accounts in compounding amounts. It, now do you want to round up? We don't
Isn't
have
that
any.
digital?
We don't
Isn't
have
that
any.
digital?
Yeah, we don't have any change from your dollar bills. So we'll keep the 2 cents or the
Yes.
7 cents or.
You see them even now in the stores saying, "Do you want your change?" What do you mean? How about if you say to them, "Oh, that's $4.98. Do you want me to give you the 98 cents?" They look at you cross-eyed, wouldn't they? Tell me how many times you go to these different stores, corporate store venues, and they have a bucket there and they talk about, "Would you like to contribute to the Children's Pimple Fund?" With all these different funds that they've been collecting for children and cancer and everything for decades, um, where's any of the poverty solved? Do you see more broken families now than you ever did? Do you see any more broken homes and single women trying to struggle to raise children in broken homes with all these funds and all these people caring about the children and collecting all these funds? And then the administrators have plane expenses triple, six-figure compensation plus other golden parachute venues, and you see the poverty continue. Perfect example. Look what they bombed Haiti to get a gold contract for some political president's brother, and it wasn't granted. So all of a sudden, Haiti had a tsunami bomb, a bomb planted in the water near Haiti, and people collected billions upon billions of dollars for the Haitian people to help restore Haiti, and they built about 20 buildings there. As a matter of fact, Jimmy Carter helped do some of them, and the people are still poor, and they were stealing children.
Yeah.
Epstein's Island. Y'all still going for the BS? According to GATT, which is the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, you must have a Social Security number. See House Report 103-926. So they're forcing people into the International Monetary Fund, making them think that it is a fund available to them by some insurance policy by which they themselves have been taxed and taxes have been taken from them, and the fact that no fund exists whatsoever. And the politicians that you keep thinking are your government have been robbing it and sending it to some nation state that was established in 1948. They're all Zionists. I don't know why you all haven't caught on yet. I think people know, but they just don't want to accept the truth. It's hard. However, now they've thrown you off the plantations because the world won't trade with them. I think many of you better start getting serious and educating yourself in a lot of these reality facts. And back, one of the things we were talking about earlier, in the car. Number 14, you own, emphasized, no property under the U.S. democracy, period. Slaves cannot own property, period. Read carefully the deed assigned to the property that you have been duped into thinking is yours. You will note that you have been listed as a tenant on that misrepresented document. See Senate Document 43, 73rd Congress, first session. 15. The most powerful court in the United States of America is not the United States Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. See 42 PA CSA 502. 16. The King of England financially backed both sides of the conflict in the American Revolutionary War. See Treaty of Versailles, July the 16th, 1782. Treaty of Peace, 8, Statute 80. And we've got plenty more for you. These are just simply fundamentals. So you all want to sit up here and argue about the Democratic and Republican Party, both which are Whig-Moore party split. Two sides of the same coin of anti-constitutionalist and anti-republic order, battling over your estate, and the treasuries against the Moors, i.e. people of African descent, was set forth in 1861 after they murdered Lincoln. It's called the coup d'etat of 1861, March 27th. This is why the Pope of Rome, Pope Francis, informed all of you with a letter written directly to Barack H. Obama and stated about the fraud that took place over 150 years ago, and that the bond system used for the United States to fund the United States Corporation was based on the enslavement of the descendants of Africans falsely tagged as African Americans. Now that's the fact. Now nations want to buy those treasury bonds anymore, and it appears that the United States Corporation is having a problem. Well, how about you all declaring your nationality and killing the rest of those bonds, rather than trying to get back on the job? Because remember, the U.S. Corporation Company has been dissolved. I think many of you forgot when Pope Francis had that meeting with the motu proprio, what he called so-called religious leaders from around the world and political leaders, and they promised to cease and desist operating the doctrine of discovery, which is what you've been falsely calling racism and prejudice. That's really what you've been suffering from. And now, so you have a rebellion amongst themselves. So now the Whig-Moore party is fighting among themselves between the Cotton Whigs and the Conscience Whigs that you're calling the Republican and the Democratic Party, pretending that you don't know the history. Pretending that you don't know the history. So they need more stock. So somebody be knocking on your door. Yeah, I want to sign this census and shit. So they can create more stock. However, they've been dissolved. So who do you think you're dealing with? A rogue operation of corporations known as the United States Corporation Company that has been dissolved.
We're seeing the connections with over the last 10 months. You now see how many things are actually connected.
Of course.
That you thought were individual corporations or individual operations. You thought
given different names.
Entertainment, there was sports,
they're
there was
all
education, there
intertwined.
Was government. Now you see it's all one big.
They're all connected.
Absolutely.
You know what's really happening? This is another thing that's happening, and you all pay attention to this. The problem that they're having is when the nations of the earth stop buying U.S. Treasury bonds, they could no longer float the bonds. And so you'll see, this is for all of you who think that we're just talking ideas. Look in New York and do a research on how many building booms, that's those big booms that you see building those big buildings. See how many of them have reduced in the last year compared to the year before in San Francisco, in Seattle, in New York, and many of your major cities that have been operating under the Ku Klux Klan Democratic Party and see how many of them booms have come down because they can't float bonds. And so they're acting like, well, we can't send the children to school and shit because of COVID-19. Well, the real deal is they don't have the funding and they can't float the bonds. You better start looking at international venues and look at the fact that the trade windows have frozen up. And as I reminded many of you 7 years ago, and re-emphasized about 3 years ago, pay attention to Deutsche Bank in Germany, which is really the CIA's dumping ground for the trade and the derivatives that have been hidden through there by congressmen and senators with their offshore accounts, and all the so-called mortgages of most of the dead pledges that have been operating and bundled at North America are actually housed or controlled under the Deutsche Bank in Germany. Do a little research, y'all. You're being played big time. And you're not poor right now by accident. It's not by accident whatsoever. And you're thinking about voting for these criminals? Keep it up. Have fun with your own estate being liquidated. '22. The Pope of Rome claims to own the entire planet Earth, Midgard, through the laws of conquest and discovery. See Papal Bulls of 1495 and 1493. There we go. So are you all suffering from racism, or are you suffering from the Papal Bulls of the Roman Catholic Church? Because they own Britain, and they own the U.S. corporation that went bankrupt again in 2013.
Oh, Canada.
Well, you know, the things that the people should be discussing, they're not discussing. And the things that they shouldn't be discussing, they're begging, we fought and died for the right to vote against ourselves. Duh. It's really interesting. And again, some of you, and I'll repeat this, is number 13. And for some of you and your parents who've been thrown off the jobs, check your Social Security checks. So your Social Security checks come directly from the International Monetary Fund, which is an agency of the United Nations. And back to what Dr. Naila was saying earlier, they hide a lot of these venues under different names when they're absolutely all connected. So when you see the Social Security operations, it is the IMF. And when you see the IMF, you're looking at the United Nations. So C, Social Security check states, the U.S. Department of Treasury. So you see that the Social Security Administration, the International Monetary Fund, United Nations, and the U.S. Department of Treasury are all one and the same entity. And you'll find the U.S. Department of Treasury at the top left corner of the Social Security check, which is again a part of the United Nations. That's a fact. But learn how to do some cross references, y'all.
Please, Dr. G, mention November 7th.
Say it again.
Somebody's asked me to mention November 7th, 2020 embassy. Abdullah Mosi Bay location, please. I don't have that information.
Yep.
It's not.
I didn't get it.
They're asking about United Republic, but I don't have that information
Oh, they're talking about when
for Abdullah. And, yeah, they
yes.
mentioned, but I don't have the details
Yes, go on the sites and
Yeah.
look at it. You'll see the flyer
on their
they have on their site. Yes.
Yeah, on their site. So
Yes, on Saturday. Yeah.
who was it? I'm just trying to see if there's. I'm trying to go back up to questions. Move so fast. Nations too.
And again, like it's number 3, and this is in relationship to the IMF and the United States Treasury and the Department of the Treasury, they all being one and the same. The United States has not had a treasury since 1921. And you can see that at Chapter 41, Statute 214, page 654. So, they are actually stealing from the people, sending it to so-called foreign nations aid to foreign nations, which are really where they have in private accounts for themselves. And then they're claiming their own private theft as being the national debt. Number 1, they're not a nation. Number 2, they're a private corporation, and that corporation has been dissolved. So who do you think is forcing you to pay taxes? I don't need to tell you, you start thinking about all these people that you keep talking about voting for.
This is interesting. Let me see if I can find it again.
You better think about governing yourself.
Dre Work, it says most Moors never even been to Africa. Shaking my head. That's not true.
You're standing on
We're
Africa.
In Africa. We're in.
You're standing on Africa.
We're here.
There you go. Northwest Africa.
Right here. Wow. Just trying to see. Someone says U.S.
That's really what they're telling you in The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
They're really telling you that. You're home already, Dorothy. You've been played. You bumped your head.
Aubrey Cameron says, what do you think about the lie that Second Amendment rights protection is our rights, but law enforcement does not honor any of the law?
Now, aren't we talking about the Organic Act of Congress 1871, February 2nd, where the Congress set up the U.S. democracy to steal the existing rights of the people? Because remember, Constitution don't give you rights; they secure rights that already exist. The Constitution's existence is just an affirmation of rights that already exist. See, the concept that the Constitution gives people rights is a wrong concept. The Constitution is in place to keep persons who are governing in check. Concept, civics. Just like governments don't have money, governments don't have rights or liberties to sell you or to grant to you. They have an obligation to secure those rights. And when they breach those obligations, they have no right to even talk to you. That's more tell you what you can or cannot have. Our concepts about this whole operations of treaty and constitutions have been incorrect.
Mohez P. March says in England, they made it so that if you do not sign the consensus, I guess that would be the census.
Isn't that called arbitrary?
They threaten you with a large fine in the
so
thousands.
Isn't that called arbitrary? Again, they're telling you that they're criminal. Governments are instituted by people, by the governed. How does somebody, a so-called employee, of course that's a fraud, or so-called public servant tell you that you owe them more finance than you even can generate yourself, and if you don't, they're going to F you up. And then you call them your government. Do you see how people have been actually trained that they really don't understand what government is or what government is not? And the more and more you look at things that are going on, you recognize people really do not have a basic, fundamental study in civics that has been actually um, fostered among the people. The people actually think that government is arbitrary, rather than recognizing that they're organized rogue criminals. And as a matter of fact, whenever some politicians even make a statement like that, issue a quo warranto and show where they derived that authority in the first place, and you won't find it because it doesn't exist. No different than somebody walking up in you're at ATM, somebody walk up on you and says, take out all the fiat and give it to me or I'm going to shoot you. Exactly the same thing. Tell me where it's different.
So, Darren Logan asks if you can please talk about the Buck Act.
The Buck Act? Oh, where they are taxing everyone. Look up the Buck Act. And this is where they're taxing you unlawfully. And it was mainly directed at our people, basically.
And what did,
Yeah.
where did those who have Louis Anthony May L says, where do those who have jobs get their pay from?
They don't get, see, this is back to the point. Let's Article 1, Section 10. No court shall issue any bills of credit or make anything but gold or silver coin for payment in debt. Have any of you been paid in silver or gold, which is the money? If you haven't, you have not been paid. See House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session, June the 5th, 1933, i.e., with the U.S. bankruptcy. Also, the fact that all departments of the U.S. corporation have been dissolved. Now, tell by law anyone that you know who's ever been paid. And so the concept that you being paid is a false concept in the first place.
So Master God Squad asks, what papers are needed to set up your own business as a Moor?
Your divine right is called nationalization and the restoration of your estate. This is why we always tell people do a reversion of estate. And this is again why we're talking about self-government. See, the people keep looking to the dissolved operatives of the rogue state corporation called the United States for remedy. They're not the remedy, they're the problem. And then you go and ask them for permission to exercise a right that already exists with you. And then you sign up and give your rights to them to regulate over you. People don't understand what nationalization means. Study carefully what nationalization means. Also study carefully what naturalization means. And also study the word in law called arbitrary.
Jan K. Smith says, is Boricua the nationality for Mexicans? Heard we're Moors too, but I seen that Moor is dark-skinned people. I'm light-skinned, straight, wavy hair. I don't look Moor or Albion. This is confusing.
If you're Mexican, you're still a Moor. If you're Mexican, all you need to do is do research in Mexican history, and they'll tell you, your foreparents will tell you that you're Moors. Olmec is Moors. Old Mexum. That's what Olmec is. You know, when the hybrid conquered the Moors, they even have a song. They call the songs under the Moorines. They call it From the Halls of Montezuma to the Shores of Tripoli. They'll fight their country's battles. Ha! They took over. Get the point? What do you think Montezuma is?
Montezuma.
The Yucatan. Modern Mexico.
Inner City News says, how many Moors do we need to petition a class action lawsuit? I'm not sure about what.
Isn't the fact that you're becoming conscious that's already a plebiscite to the world? See, we are trying to get our people cleaned up in the state of mind of stop asking the occupier for rights, which he will never give, that he has none to give in the first place. You must declare your right. It's called nationalization. The state of mind. See, it's sort of like, this is where the conflict comes when I tell you, Dr. Naila, a lot of people come into these venues looking for remedies, and their conversation, i.e. state of mind, is contradictory. They're still thinking like a subject, but trying to act like a sovereign. They talk from a subjected position. It's like somebody asking you, Dr. Naila, where can we make application, sign the application for the right to see what time it is on my watch? That mentality. You see, that mentality is part of what must be cleaned up.
Inner City News also asks, let me go above that. Marvin Mays, why have you all not put this in the USA Today newspaper? Like they would let that be put in.
The question is self-evident.
I know. I just had to read it.
Yeah, but it's good. It's good. But I'm just, because it's something for us to think about. See the state of mind.
Yeah, and maybe not.
And it's not intended to be negative.
But I know it's not. But from a standpoint of USA Today, it would be like
that belongs to
them. So
Zionists.
I'm going to expose you in your
like
own
the Zionists. Look how even that. Look how many, particularly in more recent weeks and months, people who have shared information from around the world, even on the internet, and been shut down. What makes you think they're going to take information against themselves and publish it in their papers that they controlled? Why do you think they burned down Tulsa, Oklahoma, which had the wealthiest bank on the land still controlled by Moors? Why do you think the infiltrators into the Moorish Divine and National Movement tore down Noble Drew Ali's printing presses that he has established for the Moors, for the Moorish Monitor and the Moorish Guide? And Drew Ali said, this is our most powerful weapon in the hand of our group, our own press. Do you hear about any of the Moors in the temples talking about Noble Drew Ali's press, the Monitor and the Moorish Guide? And he owned the press, and millions of dollars backed by gold for the Moors, and it was stolen. And it's called the Great Sellout that nobody wants to talk about. And then they're talking about, how come the Courier Post don't tell us this stuff? How come the New York Times, Horace Greeley, tell us this stuff? Whiggamore Party? Come on, y'all, let's stop playing dumb. But these same people keep building churches, mosques, and synagogues, don't they? And going into debt, won't they? But do they set up their own press? But they buy Gucci pocketbooks and stuff. I mean, it's really interesting when you study.
Well, Inner City News says, how do we go about getting our own banks, airports, and hospitals and function?
Isn't that why you see the Moors being active, trying against multiple levels of resistance among their own and from the hybrid Europeans of the corporation, United States corporation, bankrupt corporation, keep claiming jurisdiction that they do not have? and doing everything they can to block us at every corner, and yet we've been consistent. We've been consistent for years, and how many people you'll hear saying, well, he's saying the same thing he said before. The truth is nothing else to say but the truth.
That's right.
It doesn't come in versions.